All right, it is 6:30, so I will call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, February 13th, 2023. We are in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak?
Here.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Here.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Ms. Wright?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present. Board does have a quorum, and I do have from Ms. Heitz that this meeting has been properly noticed, so we are good there. On our agenda tonight, we do have 2 action items, and then we will also have an update on the Youth Sports Consortium, which is different from other meetings, so that's new under information items. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is our consent calendar. We do have minutes from previous meetings. You had the approval of payments. We did have a staff resignation that you saw. And then we have the following donations, which I will read. $300 from Fidelity Charitable for the Fritz Classroom. $1,000 from Kyle and Jennifer Jacobson for the splash pad. $400 from Dental Health Associates of Madison for the splash pad. $15 from Lori and Mitchell Sigmund for the 7M activity account. $15 from Ty Gribb for the 7M activity account. $66.90 from Friends of the Orchestra. OHS for the orchestra activity account. 8th grade orchestra field trip to MSO on February 8th. $20 from Catherine Klins for school supplies. $25 from Amanda and Benjamin Bartlett for the OMS German Club German Honor Society ceremony donation. $300 from Irene Draper for the Draper Family Scholarship, $350 from Carla Draper for the Draper Family Scholarship, $250 from Dwayne Draper for the Draper Family Scholarship, $100 from the Burns family for the FES Library in Memory of Melody Bailey, $50 from Bradley and Laura Burns for the OMS Band, and $1,500 from the Oregon PTO as a donation to RCI. So we do thank those individuals and entities for their very valuable donations to the Oregon School District. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Moving on to B, information items. Is there anyone here for public comment? All right, is there anyone here for public comment? One more time, anyone here for public comment? Okay, moving on, OEA report. We do have OEA representatives here, but they will not speak tonight, so thanks for being here. And then moving on to student report. We do have a student here, Peyton. The floor is yours.
So recently, everyone has been preparing for our new spring dance, which is very exciting, as well as the NHS eligibility letters just went out today. So everyone is working to get that prepared, as well as some other major scholarship opportunities for upperclassmen have been being released this week. Our play is airing this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So this week is Tech Week. So we're keeping all of our musically inclined students pretty busy. Our group is taking a trip to the middle school this week on Thursday to meet with their student council and hear some of their ideas and be able to support them and then help facilitate those ideas at the high school as well. Spring sports are about to begin, with some people having tryouts as early as next week, all the way through the beginning of March and April. And then we'll be in full swing as soon as April starts with all of our spring sports.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to C, action items. The first action item is approval of Jack Mitchell Memorial Environmental Scholarship. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. For those of you who've been in Oregon for a while, Jack Mitchell is a name that you will recall very fondly. He was an Oregon community teacher, coach, and advisor at the high school for almost 30 years. He was the founder of ECOS, which is currently still a club at the high school, and it stands for Environmentally Concerned Oregon Students. He was a passionate gardener and a steward of the earth. And so his family, in honor of all that he stood for related to environmental stewardship, they are offering the Jack Mitchell Memorial Environmental Scholarship Fund, which is a beautiful way to remember a lifelong educator. So it would be something eligible for our OHS seniors who've demonstrated a passion for environmental stewardship. and it would be in the amount of $500. And so I want to personally say thank you to Mr. Mitchell's family for doing something that honors his legacy in such a beautiful way.
Okay, great. I will entertain a motion on the floor, and then once that motion is made, if there's any discussion or questions, we can take those up.
I will make the motion to approve the environmental scholarship.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussions or questions? All right, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you to the Mitchell family and to Jack Mitchell for all of his service to the Oregon School District. All right, action item 2, approval of the Human Growth and Development Advisory Ad Hoc Committee charge. So I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom again.
Thank you. Actually, we have Mr. Tanner, our Director of Learning and Student Achievement, who will be coming up to walk the board through the proposed charter for the ad hoc committee.
Hello. Human growth and development. We have a purple on this, and so you can read through it there. But the essential part of this is that we provide health instruction, and a portion of our health and wellness curriculum has to do with human growth and development. And if for any district who does do that, there are certain statutory requirements for what's included in that and when you teach those topics. There are certain things that the state has said you have to teach these, and you have to teach these like all in the same year so that students get all portions of that. Furthermore, whenever we revise our human growth and development curriculum, the state also requires by statute that we convene an ad hoc, or that the board appoint an ad hoc committee that is advisory in nature to review the current curriculum and make recommendations for changes. The statute also determines the composition of the ad hoc committee. So there's a limit to the different, a limit to the number of staff who can be part of it. Actually, not the number, the percentage or the portion of the committee. And there's also a limit to, they kind of say any one group can't be more than like a quarter of the size, or a fifth of the size, and a fifth of this. Any one group can't be more than 1/5 of the total composition of the committee. And then the 1/4 is you can't have not more than 1/4 of the committee can be made up of employees or spouses of employees. So there's a little bit of number finagling that we need to do there. But essentially what we're asking the board to do at this point is to convene, or I guess tell us to convene such an advisory committee to review the current curriculum that is in place, to analyze the current state statutes and other health information and current research on best practices for human growth and development, and to return to you with a list of recommended actions in the next couple of months.
All right, thanks, John. So what we'll do again, it's a charge that's a state statute directed charge to the Board of Education. So I'll entertain a motion to put that on the floor in a second, and then we can have any questions or discussion.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Go ahead, Tim, go ahead.
John, when was the last time we did this?
It was the 2015-16 school year.
Okay, because I don't recall setting this charge in the past. That's why I ask. Okay, thank you.
Heather, you had a question?
Yep, mine is just on how, should this be approved, how does this information get shared out with the appropriate people who could make up the committee?
So we've begun brainstorming. Some are sort of obvious, like our medical advisor, Dr. Sleeth, because in the past, our medical advisors have always been included. The state encourages there to be medical personnel and experts in adolescent health, both physical health, well-being, and mental health. We also want people who are involved or have knowledge of basically like youth current trends in healthy activities or lack of unhealthy activities. And we also include parents. Our typical practice for groups like this is we ask principals to suggest parents from each of their buildings. That way we get a nice cross-section of people. And we, of course, include the teachers, the staff who are involved in providing that instruction. For example, our health teachers and our guidance counselors, because they both teach certain aspects of protective behaviors, healthy habits, and wellness, wellness instruction. So we also ask, like our nurses, school nurses are really anxious to be part of it too. So we will pick somebody, because that limitation that I mentioned, we can't have 40 people who are all employees, because then we would have to have a committee size of 160, and that's not a committee anymore. So we basically will pick representatives of different staff groups and different parent groups, parents of students from different ages and different schools to be part of the group, and then the medical experts. And sometimes we can have those combined in the same place, or if we have parents who are also have some medical expertise, that's just kind of a double win for us.
All right, any other questions? Go ahead, Anna.
I just wanted to point out, so this is a K through 12 evaluation, so I'm assuming then would have a spectrum of not only of families as well as the medical experts or school health professionals that are at those various levels to provide that feedback.
Yeah. We would have staff and medical professionals. We have our own medical professionals, which are basically our nurses, and so we would have probably one of them but they float amongst multiple buildings, and so they would kind of represent a wider age range.
Sure.
But then we'd also have counselors, and like our health teachers would be from probably multiples of them to represent the different grade levels.
Perfect.
And also they would be providing information, because we're going to ask them to say, please present and explain to us the current curriculum, so that we can take a look at it and review it and compare it to the current health standards and recommendations from the state.
And can you just confirm that we're recommending this review really because we feel that a regular review of this curriculum along with state statute is just advised? There's not something that's changed that has triggered this. It's really more of a let's check in, make sure that we're meeting the standards that are expected of us and best practices on how it's being delivered, those sorts of things.
Yeah, the state recommends that it be done like every 3 to 5 years. It used to be a requirement, and it's no longer a requirement, it's just a recommendation. And we're kind of playing catch up after COVID, because we had a number of things. I've talked before about how we had new social studies standards in 2018 that we were starting in 2020, and they kind of fell apart. This is one of those also that would have happened probably during COVID, and so right now we're playing catch up a little bit with some of these curricular and standards reviews. So it's just a regular process that we do to review everything and make sure that we're up to date and meeting whatever the current state standards are, and also best practices. An example of that is that the Dane County Youth Survey, which is done regularly but not every year, gives us more insight into some of the habits that students have. And it's self-reported, but it's really interesting. And so an example that's been brought to my mind about something we need to change is that we have a lot of information on tobacco and smoking, but really not much on vaping. And really, if you look at student usage trends, vaping is a much higher concern than traditional smoking. So that's one of those things that we'll likely take a look at and change, because there's new medical research about vaping. Wasn't as much before. And also we know that that's a habit or a activity that has become much more prevalent. And so we feel like we need to do a much better job teaching our students to be more aware of, so that they can have the information about the dangers of that in order to make healthier decisions. So that's an example of that's not coming from a state standard, that's coming from being responsive to the actions of students that we see.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Leslie, did you have a question?
Well, I did, but I think Anna covered
Okay.
most of it. I think that the only thing I had wanted to verify was you had talked about different groups that were going to be asked to be part of this. And I do see that mental health is on here and that that's a huge thing. Are we looking at our school psychologists as well, or other professionals in the area that would maybe help us with that portion of that?
Yeah, we've kind of made little mental notes of some people who we want to ask, who are experts in that area, and we've kind of been waiting for the official charge before we contact anybody. So I've been thinking of people who've either participated in the past, who've been resources, or who just have come to mind as part of prior medical groups and things like that. So yeah, mental health is definitely part of it, and we would ask one of the school psychologists to represent sort of that school psych area as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Tim, you had a question?
Just reading through the description of the ad hoc committee, it looks like we're looking for district residents. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately what size group are you targeting?
Well,
We're talking about 15 people, or are we talking about 40?
it's probably closer to like 20 or 25.
Okay. And how much time do you anticipate it taking, just so we can be advocates and encourage people to reach out?
We've penciled in 4 meetings of about an hour and a half each. However, there will be significant reading ahead of those meetings. We expect people to read a significant amount of the current research, like the results of the Dane County Youth Survey, some of the medical recommendations, the state standards, and our current curriculum beforehand, so that when we have our meeting times together, that can really be doing work together that's collaborative. So I would say at least double that, probably like a couple hours at least of reading for each prior to each meeting. So I'll just roughly say probably 2 to 3 hours of preparation, and then a meeting that's an hour and a half, and there'd be 4 of those.
Okay. And last question, is there any particular viewpoint, is there any particular person that would be helpful that you think might be difficult to encourage to come to that meeting?
Well, there's often families who are sort of underrepresented. A lot of it is sort of our global majority populations, people who don't necessarily have the ability to interact frequently with our groups. For example, we started a bilingual, bicultural committee to look at our current statutes and our practices and our curriculum, and we invited a lot of families who either speak Spanish as their home language because we wanted their input on English as a second language and bilingual, and none of them could come, and so that was difficult for that particular group. So, just because of when we held the meetings, those were during the day. These will be during the evening, so maybe we'll have better opportunities. But I think in general, we want to get a nice wide cross section of the whole district, and so we're going to make efforts to reach out to some of the ones who we typically don't see, sort of typically underrepresented demographic groups.
All right, great. Thanks, John.
All right, any other questions or discussion? Okay, Mary, go ahead.
Just one quick one. So the categories and the percentages, are those regulated by that same state statute?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright? Yes. My apologies. Ms. Garrison? Yes. Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. You have your charge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. All right, moving on to D, discussion items, committee reports. First up is policy. Heather.
Yep. We just met before this meeting, so we'll be bringing some recommendations from the policy committee at our next board meeting. And we are meeting March 6th. We're meeting March 6th, week before, at 5 o'clock. 5:30? 5:30.
Sounds like that was a group decision. Way to go. Way to get input. All right. Thank you. Policy has been busy. Okay. B, vision steering. Troy.
Yes, we met recently and we discussed, got a little history lesson on our bus contractor arrangement. And I will I'm pleased to say that we continue to be very pleased with our bus contractor arrangement that we have with our district. It's been working very, very well for us. We have started to have some discussions about the sustainability of that system, and began talking about some enhancements that we may explore that may or may not result in changes to the contract or the policy. But just kind of having some early stage discussions on ways that we can enhance the system to make sure that it maintains its viability.
All right, great. Thank you, Troy. Okay, moving on to E, information items. First is update on Youth Sports Consortium, so I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom to introduce our athletic director.
Thank you. Brittany Spencer Grant, our athletic director, is here tonight to give you an update on the continuation of the work from the 2017 Youth Sports Task Force and how that is currently living within the work of the athletic director and the partnerships with our community. And I'll pass it over to Ms. Spencer Grant.
All right, thanks for having me. So I'm going to start out with a little bit of the backstory as to how we got to where we are right now. So some of you in the room are probably more familiar with this, but back in, I think it was 2017, the school board kind of established the Youth Sports Task Force. And they met multiple times and came up with 3 recommendations or 3 findings. So recommendation 1 had to do with creating a community survey for both parents and students, and that was a K-12 survey that was distributed and that was completed. Recommendation 2 had to do with forming a collaborative consortium, and that did not take place prior to this year, so that one we're still working on. And then recommendation number 3 had to do with the creation of a parent advisory council, and that council was formed, and they had what were called some deliverables, some kind of recommendations, but I'm unclear if that fully went to the board or it was just kind of some stuff that they had moving forward. So our consortium has kind of gone through some of the work that they've done too, and we've seen a lot of parallels. So we're trying to kind of piggyback on some of the work that they've done too. So what you see on the screen now is that's the exact language or the task that was given to us in recommendation number 2. And kind of the big words are, to collaborate and develop best practices, shared beliefs, and information processes that are specific to the topics of coach preparation and training, communication to families, and age-appropriate development and seasons. So those are kind of the big underlying focuses that we have as we've been going through our discussions. So a little bit about the consortium itself. We've met 3 times so far since the end of October. We've been meeting roughly every 6 to 8 weeks. It's been a bit of a challenge trying to find mutual dates that work for everybody. We have 12 different youth sports groups represented on the consortium. There are 3 high school coaches who have volunteered their time to be a part of the group. We have a representative from the Booster Club and then myself. So right now we are about 17 members strong. As we kind of keep moving forward, we're taking that work from the Parent Advisory Council. And one of the things that they had as one of the deliverables was to use a phrase or a slogan called "It's Their Game." I think the purpose behind that was, it's about the kids, not so much about the rest of us. So we're trying to combine that with a slogan that we came up with at the consortium that you've maybe seen recently. I've been trying to put it on our video boards, and it's athletes compete, coaches coach, and spectators support. So those are kind of the 2 phrases that we're trying to get out into the community. We have a request into one of our high school design classes to try and come with maybe some sort of flyer or, some sort of messaging that we can get out into the community too. We're hoping to come up with some sort of visual representation for that. The Parent Advisory Council did have a visual that they kind of liked previously, so we gave that to the class too to use kind of as a visual guide. Another thing that we're working on right now is we discovered that the task force had collected a lot of data from the different Oregon youth sports groups. So we are working to recollect some of that data. It had to do with, mission statements and philosophies of the different organizations. Things as simple as how many athletes do you represent? Does your organization make cuts? How many practices and competitions does your organization have? Are there out-of-season opportunities for your kids? What's the cost? What are the finances involved? Is your organization paying facility rental fees? Coaching, how many coaches do you have? What sort of training opportunities are provided to them? And then kind of the parent information. Do you have requirements of your parent as volunteers? Are they signing a code of conduct? So the task now is hopefully this week I'll be able to get that survey out to them, that Google form, so that the community leaders can really kind of sit down and start to give an update as to where their organization currently sits. And we can compare that to some of the data that we have from back in 2017, 2018. So kind of our plan moving forward is to continue meeting in those kind of 6 to 8 week increments, get that survey out to the Oregon youth groups to be able to provide their feedback and their data on their sports, and then to really start to kind of dig into the data. Is that I think that's going to help guide our future discussions as to things that we want to see moving forward. What do you guys have for me on the group?
Go ahead, Heather.
Thanks for this update. I have a question on the updated information. Are you collecting things like either capacity or usage of field, pool, what have you, and if there are shortages or kind of where people are struggling to find the resources to have their practices and games? Is that part of that?
Yeah, part of it has to do with what are the facilities that you're using, how much time are you using them? I'm trying to think if there's something currently on there about, like, do you need additional space? So I can go back and look at the questions because I haven't sent it yet and try and incorporate that into there.
Yeah,
I think to your point is that's where we're trying to get information for the recreational facility study, that we're missing the piece of putting this all together because people are saying that they don't have facility usage, but we don't know that because we don't have the data. So we have to understand who's using what when, and also back to the actual task force was, we also have to understand that we have to prioritize in terms of what is an in-season and what is an out-season, which also goes into development, right? Because kids should only be practicing however many age they are in years, and so that's the other piece to it, which gets into the coaching, training, and all this kind of stuff related, which is who's using our facilities when, because it's education-based athletics. That was the whole piece, right, and we all know the stories. We're trying to get back to that. So your question is, that's what we should be collecting.
Right. That was my hope that you were, and if you aren't, could you?
Yeah, for sure.
Other questions? Go ahead, Mary. You look like you're reaching for your microphone.
I was, but Leslie had her hand up first, but that's okay. So are all of the sports included? Because I know there are like different sports that aren't all part of the same type of organization.
So I think we have representation from everyone in the community. Obviously there's our big youth organizations, baseball, football, soccer. Those are all represented. We've got Ultimate Frisbee and rugby recently have agreed to kind of join the consortium. Lacrosse is a part of it, hockey. So I think we've got them all. And if there's one that we're missing, I apologize. Please reach out though, and we'll extend them an invite.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Leslie.
So you didn't mention swim.
Swim's on it.
Swim is on it. Okay, perfect.
Track.
And then I guess my bigger question, because that was one of my questions from that Mary just gave you too. But what are you doing as far as looking at the equity piece of this to ensure that we are offering, from a top down, all the different sports, the ability for all of our kids, no matter what, to be able to participate?
Yeah, so there's questions on the survey actually that'll hit on that. So it's, what are you charging basically for use? What are the equipment costs associated with your sport, or the traditional equipment costs? Because I know those can vary. Do you offer financial assistance? If so, what does that look like? So those are questions that are provided in that financial section of the survey. Thank you.
Other questions? I guess my question, Brittany, too, is as you get through analyzing the data, and then, as you look at, and again, I was one of the co-chairs of this initial that came up with the recommendations, and I think our hope was that we would use the data, but then move into this piece of because we do provide facilities free of charge to our youth sports organizations, that they become part of this family, and that we're all kind of operating off the same, not that they aren't, but that we're all operating off the same principle, that education is the basis for athletics. And so I guess my question is, what are your plans after you move into the data collection or determining the campaign, where we kind of get into the coach training piece, the shared goals about developmental, those sorts of things? I mean, do you kind of have a vision in terms of when those conversations start to happen?
Yeah.
Or are they currently happening?
I mean, they're happening in small quantities. One of the things I was really excited about recently is I kind of created an Oregon newsletter, an athletics newsletter. So what I did is I picked a topic, and the first topic was on sportsmanship. And I created a little 2-pager with some information and some links and some videos, and I sent it to not only our coaches here at the school, but I sent it out to the youth community leaders too of all the different organizational sports, with the hope that they would then kind of share it with their people and their coaches. So I'm hoping to create maybe one a month on some sort of topic that then can be shared and distributed, and there's hopefully some sort of common language. One of the things that was linked on there was a course offered by the National Federation of High School Sports. It's a free course on sportsmanship. So I figured the more people that can be looking at stuff like that, the more consistent messaging we can get out there. Once we get the survey data back too, I feel like there's going to be areas where maybe we're not very aligned across the board, and those could be some of the spots where we maybe target further conversations from the beginning. Mm-hmm. The other thing in the full task force report is there were those appendixes at the back. I don't know how many of you have familiarity with them, but the areas of that were kind of chunked and sectioned. And so I was almost thinking about looking at those individually and kind of choosing one, if it's one a night or one that we cover at 2 meetings. And so the big one that I was kind of eyeballing first was that kind of coach prep and coach education. So those were going to be kind of a guiding resource too.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as we see it with teaching staff, it's a tough profession, right? You're having a hard time finding coaches that actually can do it. So, and then I guess my other question too is just for my knowledge in terms of, are you seeing all the youth sports organizations really having their coaches go through either a background check or a safe sport training?
From what I've heard, at minimum, there's a background check. I think there's some inconsistencies as to what happens next after those background checks come in terms of what they are providing. Some people have shared at our meetings that, a lot of them are parents. Some of the higher competitive teams, it is kind of a non-parent, a paid stipend position, but most of them are parent volunteers. And they're pretty much taking who they can get. So I think if we're able to kind of provide some basic education to those folks, I think it enhances everything too, even the parent volunteers. Because I'd love to get that, even for myself,
right.
Coaching my own kids.
Right. What is your assessment? And I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What is your assessment of our sportsmanship, of our parents and our community as you visit other schools? And you can give me a range, but where would you place Oregon right now?
I think we're at the top, near the top. There are moments in time where people have maybe not their best behavior on display. But from the conversations I've had, people have been, reflective and apologetic of the behaviors, which, it's a learning experience too, even for us as adults. There's, moments in time we all wish we could take back. So I think it's just kind of continuing to have those conversations, and hopefully, if we're able to be more comfortable on an individual level, maybe it is a fellow parent, knock it off, so that it doesn't have to be a conversation from me or an event supervisor or, whomever. But I think we're doing pretty good.
Great. Well, I really want to say publicly, I appreciate you taking this up. COVID kind of interrupted this work. It's really important work when you think about more than half of our high school students participate in a sport, and then you look at the 22 youth sports organizations in this community. Not everybody does sports, and there's a lot of sports that are not as organized, but this touches pretty much every family in our district, so it's really important work in its education. So I thank you. I know you're a busy person. You've got a lot on your plate, so I really appreciate you taking this up and getting it going again and doing great work with it. So thank you very much.
Sounds good. Join us anytime.
Yeah. Dr. Bergstrom, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's clear that all those of us in the district understand the power of the collaboration of Oregon Youth Sports and the Oregon School District Athletics. Because if we can create a series of education-based athletic experiences starting when our kids are really young, I think that we will have players who arrive here with a whole different understanding of what it means to be an athlete in Oregon. And not that our current athletes aren't amazing. I just think that we as a community can really rally around this if we can find some points of agreement. And I think the Sports and Athletics Task Force gave us what those agreements or what we should be investigating for points of agreement. And I'm excited for it because I think our community can do really amazing things through this collaboration.
And one more thing, I really appreciate you showing that video at the end of the sport meeting too, where the kids are all talking and saying, Mom, I just want to have fun. Like, please be quiet. So it's really good messaging from you too. So I appreciate you taking the stand on some of those things.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to e-information item 2, visioning and strategic planning, teaching and learning update, and then superintendent's report. So Dr. Bergstrom.
Excellent. So we have some really good things for you tonight in the teaching and learning. And I think all of you know where we're at related to the visioning and strategic planning. I am so excited to see Portrait of a Graduate popping up all over the place. As a matter of fact, Mr. Tanner and I joined Dave Ebert and our K-8 math coordinator, Celia Pazwa, today to talk about the work they've been doing in the creation of a 4K-12 mathematical instruction vision. And guess what the first graphic was? Portrait of a Graduate, and how that vision is connected to that. So I just want to use this opportunity to say we see all of the pieces coming together, and it's pretty exciting. And I think John will give us a really specific example of that right now.
Chair just feels like a little bit of a lowrider, so I was trying to find the adjustment. When I was up here before, I was like, I feel like I'm at the little kid's chair. All right, well, thanks. This is great to get to talk to you twice tonight. So the teaching and learning update for tonight is to give you some background on the grade 6 through 8 math curriculum review that we are kind of at the culminating point of right now. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Whoever has it, there you go. Thank you. So the purpose of this presentation is pretty much to describe our work over the past couple of years and to give you an idea of our next steps. Like I said, we're kind of at the end point of this. But a little bit of background first for you, because you may not know this. We have 3 different math curriculums. I had to look it up. Curricula and curriculums, they say, are interchangeable. So if you have a strong preference one way or the other, just forgive me. But I don't know which one to use. So we have 3 different ones that are used in the district right now. So grades 4K through 5 is Bridges in Math, or Bridges Math, and that's obviously just that we implemented like 6 years ago. So that's our elementary program. Grades 6 through 8, we have CMP, which stands for Connected Math Project, not to be confused with CPM, which is the curriculum we use at the high school. Yeah, those couldn't be closer and in name, so you got to pay close attention to that. So grades 6 through 8 right now, we're using CMP version 3. And what we decided to do is take a look at the curriculum that was there for grades 6 through 8, and we did a curriculum review. So again, this was sort of that cyclical curriculum review because we go through the process. And Darcy Krieger and I are working on a formalized, like 6-year curriculum evaluation and implementation cycle where we'll look through these things on a regular basis, roughly following DPI's adoption of standards because they plan it out over multiple years. And like I said, we're getting back on track after COVID. But one of the reasons we did this is because DPI actually did, they revised the state math standards. They added some math, they call them shifts in 2021. And so this is basically what they did here is they said we've got a couple different shifts. One is about identity. And this was actually a really big component of that math vision that Dr. Bergstrom just talked about with Dave Ebert and Celia Pazwa, because it's talking about how students view themselves, their identity as being a mathematical thinker. Not that everybody needs to be like super fast at flashcards or like really, you know, good at scribbling down long division. It's more about how do we use these mathematical tools to think and model the world, because really that's the essence of what math is. It's modeling things, it's figuring things out in a representational way. So that identity portion is something that the Wisconsin standards really are starting to emphasize, to get people to, or students especially, to think about being math learners, being doers of math, actually even more than learning, but being able to do it and see the representations of their world around them in math. The second one is flexible users, which I kind of alluded to already. It's they use math and see how it can be used to understand the world and world around them. So those are the two main things that were revised in 2021. And then they also decided to improve on a couple things that are in the Common Core math standard, or Common Core state standard math shifts. So one of the big shifts has been to focus on fewer skills but with deeper understanding. To understand concepts deeply so that they can be applied in a different scenario or a different situation, like understanding what the meaning of things is, so that instead of just being able to do a problem on paper, you know, like, oh, calculate the area of this triangle, well, it's being able to say, okay, what does that really mean? You know, what does it mean to have area or volume? And then being able to apply that to real world scenarios, which is obviously kind of the goal. Another one, big shift for the Common Core, was to have coherence by ensuring vertical alignment. So making sure that we have that K-12 flow that goes all the way through. And that's actually one of the things that we took into consideration, because we have 3 math curriculums, and we were thinking, well, if we only had 2, like that would be one less transition. Now, that's not the only reason we would pick something, but it is one of those ideas that, you know, having that, making sure that whatever we use, it's coherent K-12, and that's something that apparently has been a nationwide issue, which is why the Common Core said that they wanted to focus on that. The other one is really becoming more rigorous. And it doesn't mean hard for hard's sake. It just means to have a high level of grade appropriate intellectual engagement, to understand the concepts that are there, being also able to be fluent in the procedures that we generally do, which is kind of what we would typically think of as math or arithmetic, and then being able to apply them, again, in real world situations. So those are the changes that happened. And we came up with a couple goals based on that. Is that we want to select a curriculum that aligns with the revised math standards. That only makes sense, right? Like, there are these standards we're supposed to learn, and if we have a curriculum that doesn't match, we're probably not going to do too well on the state assessments. So we wanted to make sure that that was updated. We wanted to build a student culture of understanding, and that's across grade levels, but math seems to be especially easy for people to sort of hone in on and be like, well, it's just math, you know, it's not related to other things. Develop that identity of that students have as being a doer of math, and then to increase that vertical alignment K-12. So those were the goals that we basically set out to do. And then we created a task force, or a team. We created an evaluation team. Celia Paswa did an amazing job with this, and we originally went to our 6th through 8th grade teachers and said, look, we really want to revise this. Like, it's been a while. Like, CMP3 has been around for a while. It's really time to look at this again. So we invited like all of them to engage in a curriculum review and selection process. And most of them actually got involved, which is really awesome because we've just got that much more buy-in, and it was really great. Celia did a wonderful job. I participated, but she really took the lead on this of, you know, identifying common beliefs, you know, making math belief statements. Like, what do we believe about what math instruction should be? What do we believe about the role of students with mathematics? And what do we believe about ourselves as teachers of mathematics? So we established a couple-year process where it was, you know, kind of laid out, a little flexible, but also, you know, fairly well defined about these are the steps we're going to go through. And we extended the timeline twice. We were hoping to do it in 1 year. We're now in like the end of year 2, because even though we had a structure and we had steps, we were really flexible to the needs of the teachers, because they said, look, we don't really feel like we can do it justice right now. We also started this during the pandemic, so it was hard to get together. It was just, you know, hard to find time, and so we've been flexible with the process, being responsive to the teachers' needs to spend the amount of time to really look at things and get a good understanding of where we wanted to go, where our curriculum is now, and then evaluate all the different options. So the rest of the bullet points, we looked at other districts, what they were doing after we had established like our non-negotiables, like it has to be this, like we want something that's not just drill and kill skills. We want something that has that procedural fluency, but also has a real emphasis on application and math identity. So we did a bunch of research from Ed Reports is a really well-regarded reporting site that evaluates curriculums of all kinds, and so we looked at that, and then we asked other districts in the area what they're using, because they're using these, some of the different curriculums, and then we narrowed it down to 2. So the ones that we ended up with, as luck would have it, they're the ones that are named almost exactly the same. So we looked at 2, CMP4, which is the newer version of CMP3. See how that works? And then CPM, which is what we have at the high school. So we actually have been piloting them this year. So we had a pilot team, and it's a really good representation of teachers from grades 6, 7, and 8 to do that pilot. And then as we're doing the pilot, we have a bunch of criteria that we're using to look at that. We're doing observations in other teachers' classrooms. And we tried to do observations of other districts, and it just got really, really difficult to do. But then we've also asked for feedback from teachers, from parents, and from students about how they feel and what they see from it. So this is you're not supposed to read the tiny print on this. This is just an example of the evaluation rubric. So basically, they took 4 areas, which you can kind of see the first 2 on the screen, but we looked at 4 major components of curriculum. We talked about the instructional design of it. How is the curriculum itself designed? What components does it have? How is it set up, the pacing? Is it spiraled? Does it revisit things? Does it have that mixed spaced practice involved? Next, we looked at the classroom culture. What kind of what kind of cooperative atmosphere does it have? What are the opportunities to learn from each other? What are the ways that students engage with math and figure things out? So that was the classroom culture component. Another one was assessment. Like, we want assessment that offers regular, high-quality feedback to students. We wanted assessments that really guide students in their learning, and we wanted assessments that are really valid and aligned well. So that was an important thing. And then other considerations, and that was sort of the mixed bag that doesn't fall into those other ones. So that was basically the criteria that we used so that we can score everything. And then one of the columns in there had a weight as well. So you basically give it you give it a rubric score, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then there's a weight so that, how the cover looks is not nearly high as, I don't even think that's on there, but that wouldn't be nearly as highly weighted as some other more important factors. So that gave us a nice way to compare, the numbers of things, and that's how we looked through. And then we did observations. And so as half the teachers piloted one curriculum, half the teachers piloted the other, and then people would go in and observe and watch. And so instead of just sometimes, if you go and observe, you can learn some things, but you can learn a whole lot more if you have specific things you're looking for. So we developed the classroom observation tool. So it basically looked at 3 different things. It's how do students interact with each other? That's that classroom culture portion, as well as a little bit of the instructional design. We looked at how do students interact with materials and curriculum, and does everybody get to participate? It shouldn't just be one person doing all the work and other people looking over. It needs to be something where everybody's involved. And then we also looked at the teacher management, so the pacing and the prep of it. Obviously, pacing is kind of important because they lay out a pacing guide that's useful for teachers to do and to look at, how you're going to get to things. And the preparation component is also a really big factor because there's, if you have something that requires you, this is why we buy curriculums, because you don't want to develop everything from scratch all the time. And so there's obviously places where we can, but having something that gave a reasonable amount of time for teacher prep and did a lot of the important components to make sure that it's all in there. So we use that classroom observation tool to do a round of observations, actually a couple rounds of observations, and then used our observation notes during the next meeting of the evaluation team to look at that and say, okay, what did you notice about this? What did you notice about this? And actually have a rich dialogue about it too, so it wasn't just checklists. We can go on to the next one. Here are some examples of quotes that we got. And I got in some student quotes, actually. later today that I didn't get on the slide deck, so I'll read a couple of them for you. But I'll just give you a couple seconds to read feedback. Feedback from parents is on the top, and feedback from 2 different teachers is on the bottom. So, I can't say they were all this glowing, but the fact that we have some of these is really good. And here are a couple quotes from students. One said, it's actually really fun. I really enjoy the activities. Okay, great. Fun is good. Maybe not the be-all, end-all, but it's nice that they enjoy it. Another one said, it's actually challenging, which makes it way more fun. Another one said, I like that it's not a lesson where we don't engage at all. Instead, we do stuff throughout the lesson, and the lesson is all spread out. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good analysis of that. So in general, the feedback has actually been really good from the teachers who've piloted it. They're really enthusiastic. The parents who have watched their students do it has been really positive. And teachers have made some really good insights. I mean, being invigorated as a teacher is something that we really would love everybody to feel invigorated, because it hasn't been very invigorating for the past few years sometimes. And also the part from the multilingual teacher about how their students were able to engage with the math was really encouraging, because sometimes if math is too language heavy, it can be difficult for English language learner or multilanguage learners to engage with it. So that was a really important point, and we actually included one of our ESL teachers in the initial evaluation team as well, to be sure that we're getting that component in. So that was important. So next steps, the group is convening a week from today to make the final decision about the curriculum. And so after that, so this is obviously the culmination. We're very excited. I want to do a drum roll here, but I won't for a week. It'll be a long time. So we're going to anxiously await that. And then after that, this spring, basically, we're going to order the curriculum materials. Thank you to Andy for helping us with planning, being planful about our budgeting for some of this, and using some ESSER funds to be able to afford it, because it's not super cheap. And then for the summer, obviously, we're going to train teachers on the curriculum, implement it in the fall. So that's new curriculum. Obviously, we're going to have a communication plan with families about what it is and what it looks like, and how this might be a little bit different. And then next year, there's just ongoing professional learning and coaching. So we're trying to make sure that we don't overwhelm teachers too much, but that we provide them the support they need. And then next spring, obviously, we're going to continue using like the Forward test and STAR test, because we do those. Forward is once a year, obviously, because it's the state test. But STAR, we do, fall and spring, and we can use that data to take a look at, what we see as student proficiency rates. So we are going to be monitoring that proficiency data year over year to make sure that we are seeing the changes the positive changes that we think we expect this to be, or to yield, and obviously we'll, make tweaks and changes based on that. So those are basically the next steps. I did want to put a thank you in here to the evaluation team and the pilot team, because boy, they put in a lot of work and they were great about it. So we had an interesting thing too, when you look at the evaluation team, is we have a wide variety of people with different backgrounds there too. So lots of 7th and 8th grade people, but we have some instructional coaches too, both instructional coaches from the middle school, one who's also at RCI. So we've got really good coach buy-in for the process, because they're going to be instrumental in helping the adoption go really well when teachers need support. So that's been just great. And the pilot team is really good. So we've got people from, all 3 schools that would be using this, and it's been really great to have them pilot it and be so enthusiastic about it. So what questions do you have for me about that?
All right, thank you, John. We'll go around the horn and see who has questions. Leslie, if you want to start, go ahead.
So on the quotes that you were showing us and reading to us, was that from both pilots, or was that more one or the other?
Yeah, these were mixed. We're not revealing which ones because we don't want to
Fair
sway
enough.
people,
I just
but,
wanted to find out if
yeah.
that was a balanced kind of thing or
Yeah.
not. And then I know this is a tendency of teachers to want to create their own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The teachers that were piloting, did they feel like that they mostly stuck to the curriculum, or did they kind of veer off a little bit?
I wouldn't say veer, but I would say expanded upon. And there is a little bit of a difference between the amount of work that is required between the different curriculums to be able to. And there's a difference between having to make your own stuff and being able to make your own stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think they liked having the real solid building blocks there, but then being able to do a little bit of the customization themselves. And that's actually present in both of them, that they're able to do some, add their personality to it, do a little bit of customization, but not feel like it's this overwhelming task that they have to develop all this stuff, because they come with a good amount of support materials.
Okay. And then this was just for 6th through 8th graders, but we talked,
Yes.
when you started, you talked about trying to narrow it down to 2. Are you looking future at like the high school end of this as well? Because I know you just, 6 years ago for Bridges.
Yeah, high school actually has been doing a cyclical adoption for the past 5 years, 6 years of CPM. I got to look here because I haven't been here in this position that long. But yeah, so they were rolling out like 1 year at a time, moving up. And so this year is the first year they actually did CPM pre-calculus. So they're kind of, so they've done, algebra, geometry, algebra 2, now pre-calc. So we aren't really scheduled to do a review of the high school math curriculum for like 2 more years. Mm-hmm. But, we definitely will look at that as we do it. Now, if we go with CMP 4, then we'll still have 3 curriculum, right. But it'll be, I think, aligned better because we've taken the time to look at it. And the math vision that Dave and Celia have been developing also really talks about that coherence going up, and the way that we're going to implement that, tangent, but we'll get to it, is trying to work on that math vision with people that are actually from K-12, so that there's that, building those lines of communication to articulate like, oh, we're doing this here in 3rd grade because that gets revisited in 6th, which forms the foundation for what you're doing in geometry. Just the process of working on that should open those lines of communication to be able to do a lot more of that alignment, so that even if we do have like 3 different curriculums, the communication between teachers is really what is important, because that's the part where you can implement it and you can tweak things. You can say, oh, well, we're going to make sure that we get to this unit this year. So we're going to move that a little sooner in the year to make sure we get to it, because we know you're going to need that, further on down the line, that sort of thing. So I think even if we have 3 curriculums, that the increased communication that we hope comes from having this sort of unified vision will make that not really it'll make it kind of a moot point.
Beautiful. And lastly, just want to thank you and your team for all the hard work that you're putting into doing this.
Yeah, I really got off easy on this one because Celia did an amazing job, and the people on the evaluation and piloting team have just been great to work with, and they've done a ton of great work.
All right, Mary, go ahead.
So I had many of the same questions as Leslie, but so are you leaving Bridges in place? You're not looking at
Sorry, that was Bridges is here. We're sticking with that. That's
okay.
And Bridges actually they released a new version about a year ago, sometime during the pandemic. They all blend together, and it has some new components to it. But when we looked at it, we're still really comfortable with the current version, So if you were adopting Bridges new, you'd take the new version. But as we looked at it, we're like, that it's not anything drastically new. So we're pretty good with just the current version that we have. They did address some of those shifts, the Wisconsin standard shifts, but not in a way that is really significant. And a lot of the things there, like the equity component, and math identity component, are things that we've already, like the teachers have already kind of ramped up on their own to include. And so it's like, well, we've already like customized in order to meet those. And so we don't feel there's a real benefit to like shifting to a new version and having to do sort of the retraining for that. So so Bridges is staying in the current version. I'll say that if any K-5 teachers are listening at home, we're not adopting a new math curriculum. High school either. Lauren? No, high school? Okay, there you go. Yeah, so Bridges is staying, CPM is staying. We're just looking at that 6-8 right now because that curriculum was much older than the other two. Both of the other ones have been adopted like 6 years ago and 5 years ago. And CMP, I don't even remember how long, but it's been older, so it really needed to get looked at.
Yeah, I think that was adopted when my son was going through middle school.
So that would be a while. Yeah.
It was a while ago. So then, was it tested at each of the 3 grade levels?
It was definitely across multiples. Yeah, we had 6th, 7th, and 8th for each one.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Heather.
My quick question is just in learning. So it sounds like this time they didn't switch, right? And right now in the literacy,
right
at K4 they're switching. I was just curious what the reasoning was for that.
Yeah, it was kind of feasibility. Honestly, we started the process with math, I think, earlier, about the same time as literacy, and so we kind of put that out there as the plan. Doing it again, I might do it with both. It was kind of just typically, I don't know that we've ever had people switch before, and it was a great idea to do, and I wish I had it first, but we didn't do it for this one. So it was just that's where that observation and collaboration component became really important. Because, yeah, you're right. You could come up with having people switch is great because then you don't have people who are just like, well, I tried this, so I want this, But it's, the team has been really open about that too, which has been really good because they've all been very committed to pursuing what's best for students rather than just, I want my thing because now I've learned it. So they've been great that way.
All right, other questions? Go ahead, Anna.
Just a quick one, I guess. From what you described, it sounds like the curriculum itself is just a little bit more hands-on or project-based or applied mathematics, where it's setting a concept of how, we're learning this because it will help us be able to do this, and then we're going to do that once we've learned this. Is that what you're seeing in the classroom as far as how it's being delivered and how kids are, what great feedback. The kids are excited about the learning and having fun with it. So I don't know if you can just speak to that a little bit on if that really is kind of the focus of these two compared to what we're using now.
Well, so actually what's interesting is Bridges. So NCTM, the National Council for Teachers of Mathematics, does a lot of books and articles and everything talking about like what is the best way to learn math these days, sort of thing. And research has shown that there are some practices that we can make different. So a lot of the publishers have started to move that way and adopt some of those best practice recommendations. So I would say Bridges and CPM, because they were made and adopted more recently, have included those. So when you look at Bridges, and in elementary, it's not as surprising to see students kind of working together on things because they tend to use a lot of manipulatives. You have like your base 10 blocks and some other things that you do. But CPM at the high school has been really interesting because it has done a different job with requiring students to collaborate on things. However, the way that they've done it is design. It's in the instructional design, and so you actually have it almost looks like a placemat. It's like a chart, and you have students working in groups of 4, and each one has a different assigned job to work on, to collaborate on whatever the task is in the middle. And those the way it's designed is that those tasks rotate from time to time, so that students, it's not, when I was in high school, if we did group work, which was rare, it was sort of, hey, you guys work on this. And it would generally be, like 1 or 2 people doing the work and the others kind of like, messing around for a while. No offense to my former classmates or indicting myself, but that was just kind of the nature of it because there wasn't like a structured like design for how you were supposed to work together. So what's happened with these is they've actually done a really good job of designing the instructional tasks that way so that there's that collaboration and that kind of like, okay, well, you come up with a way to do this, you come up with a way to do this. You both got to the answer, but how? And like, is there a benefit? Is one more efficient than the other? Did you take other things into consideration? That sort of thing. So as we're looking, and that was a little bit missing from the old version of CMP, but the new version has more of that. So as we're looking at that, that's been incorporated. So I'd say it's already present in sort of that Bridges CPM, and that's what we were looking for with this because it aligns better with the standards that talk more about collaboration and math identity and doing things, and because it aligns with a lot of the professional recommendations for how that works, and is probably more applicable to a lot of the real life situations where, you know, we hear from employers like we want people who can work together, who can explain why they did something differently to somebody else and not have it become like a fight, you know, and be like, hey, yeah, you did this, let's have a, you know, a confluence of ideas and talk about it.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a couple, and they're related, but see if I can ask them and get them out. So I found it was really curious about the standards of kind of talking about identity with math, and that having kids understand that they can do math. And so is the hypothesis with that if kids learn early or struggle early, that stays with them? Is that kind of the hypothesis, that like if you kind of math is kind of hard for you earlier, does that tend to stay your identity or not?
It's a lot of it is to try to get, I hesitate to even say it because I don't want to like reinforce the stereotype, but people are like, oh, I'm not a math person,
right,
or I'm not good at math. I was like, no, it's a skill. It's like riding a bike. I mean, you know, nobody's like, I'm not a bike person. Like, okay, maybe you don't love it, but everybody can learn to do it, and then it sticks with you. So I think part of it is kind of a reaction to that, to say like, we want students to understand there's no such thing as like a mythical math person, and if you don't feel it, then you're never going to be able to do it. It's more like, oh no, this is a tool, I can use this. And so it is like establishing that identity. And we've done that with literacy, I think, for a long time, where we talk about, you know, who are you as a reader, you know, which is a little bit easier to understand because it's like, oh, I really like mysteries, or I really like biographies, or I love nonfiction. You know, it's like, oh, who you are as a reader. We haven't really done that with math, and so I think that's part of the reason why they're trying to emphasize that identity of like, yeah, I'm a maker and doer of math. Just that part of it, that self-belief, but also sort of that like, yeah, you can explore this, you can do this. It's something that you can gain, but not just a skill. It's also part of who you are. It's part of being a person. You get to see the patterns that exist in the world and how they're represented, which is actually really cool.
So then is the next step of this new curriculum, or is the what we're basing it on, is that a relevant and empowering learning experience leads to competency? Because if we're looking at, we want our kids to be at grade level for math, or have at least a year of growth. Is this kind of what we're saying is we're going to get to those competency numbers through this curriculum because it does that?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting you brought that up, because when we were talking with Dave and Celia today, they brought up that exact thing, and they made the example of saying, you know, if our goal is we want to improve student ACT scores, well, how do you really do that? Like, that's kind of an odd goal. And there are lots of ways you can do that, but they could be like, you know, go get a test prep booklet and learn, like, statistically you should always guess C when you don't know. Okay, well, that's not helping your math any. That's just playing a game. So what they said is, like, we're going to, you know, the idea of the math vision and belief statements is that as we embrace these and as we do these practices, that is going to empower students, which we think logically has the result that it's going to end up with, you know, increased proficiency. But we're not just saying we're going to do the proficiency. We're looking specifically at the math practices, the instructional practices, and imbuing the student beliefs. Those are the way that we think logically will make them better able to understand the concepts and demonstrate it on like an assessment like the ACT or the STAR or the Forward. So yes.
So then we see our competency numbers go down when kids hit middle school. I mean, it's right. We're doing well in literacy and math until they hit 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Then we see a huge drop. So is building bridges leading into this new curriculum, meaning, or are we saying, okay, we're starting this new 6-8 curriculum, it's going to do all these things, but if Bridges doesn't lead into it, and so have we decided that Bridges is doing that too, and that's why we're moving to this, because we're doing it in K6 or 5, but we weren't doing it in 6-8? I guess I'm trying to, if you're saying it's a K-12 vision, and we see our kids are doing it K4, K5, but not 6-8, is this curriculum going to make that difference?
That is part of the goal.
Okay.
When looking at the curriculum, the CMP3 was outdated, and so it didn't really match with the standards. And so there's multiple components here to that dip. One is that all scores for everything tend to go down in middle school because there's that disengagement, there's that figuring out who we are. I think Bridges does a good job, or at least it's designed to do a good job of having students be that mathematical doer and thinker. And so now we're aligning what we have with the new curriculum. That was an objective or a goal, was to continue that emphasis through 6-8. Now, I don't think, because of just the typical actions and behaviors of middle school students, that we're going to all of a sudden see them skyrocket, and that's going to be the highest point. But that should continue, and that's why we're doing sort of longitudinal data looks. And we actually started doing STAR math at the high school just this year to have a baseline so that we can look over the next few years and see, hey, does that improve high school understanding and proficiency in skills because of, after implementing this at the middle school? So our theory is definitely that, that's going to do that, because it's going to carry on the emphasis and the momentum from elementary, from Bridges. And that's how we're going to measure it, is to see, okay, what does that look like when they get into high school? Because we should see, instead of a falling off quite as much, probably leveling out, and then also continuing that same trajectory into high school.
So in theory, kids that have been building bridges, by the time they get to the new curriculum, right, it's going to be that's great. So then the final thing, I think, which ties us together, which is the teacher. And you seem very thrilled with Dave and Celia's collaboration and kind of this K-12 vision with math. Do you see that as something that is going to be happening in literacy or other areas of the district, or is it currently happening where you have two individuals at different buildings that are really creating this vision, so that we're not looking at, here's K4, here's 6-8, here's 9-12, that kind of, we end here, our former principal of Netherwood Knoll used to say is, right, what you're doing in kindergarten ends up in, is because what they need you to have done by the time they get to 9th grade.
Yeah.
So you sound pretty excited about that.
Yeah, math, actually, we kind of took a page from literacy, because we had done a lot of work with that earlier, and talking about our beliefs about literacy instruction and about, reading and creating the culture of reading. And so that is something that we had actually in place, that we have a document that talks about our English language arts beliefs. And so we'd never really had that for math. And that was one of the reasons why we asked Dave and Celia to try to develop that, was to create a similar thing for math, so that we can always refer back to that. The idea being that once we have that vision and mission and belief statement, we can use that as a basis for future decisions we make. When we're looking at a curriculum, we can refer back to that. And that's what we've done with ELA and reading. And that's actually what's led to some of the changes we've done with the ELA adoption and the letters training, is to say, okay, well, what is our vision? What is our mission? What's our beliefs about that? Okay, well, then we need to do what we know is best, and so we're going to make some changes. But it's all based on that belief. And so I think we have a better articulated ELA. Or we've had it before, and we never really had one for math before. So
Awesome. I think this is very interesting for us, I think, as board members, but, it makes sense, right? It's as we're trying to get our kids, and it's part of our values in terms of how this all fits together. So thank you. It's very interesting. Dr. Bergstrom, any other thoughts?
Sure, just how much this ties into our portrait of a graduate, right? It's all together. Critical thinking, the ability to identify and solve problems, the ability to work independently and collaboratively. All of those pieces that we have identified as what we want for our students are a part of what they're looking for in this particular curriculum, because we know it exists in 9-12 and 4K5.
All right. Anybody else? Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Superintendent's report.
So this week is Wisconsin School Bus Driver Appreciation Week, and an appreciation note is being delivered to each of our bus drivers this week, and we'll be honoring them with a special breakfast in April. But I think it's also probably a fitting moment to acknowledge that one of our longtime bus drivers, who just recently retired, passed away this weekend. It was Dan Elmer passed away, and he was just a wonderful educator as a bus driver. Kindness, patience, the gentleness, and the humor. I think everybody who has served as a principal and worked with Dan always knew that when he came in to talk to you about a kid, he was coming in with the most pleasant and kind intentions and problem solving on behalf of the student. And it's a big loss. He was still a substitute driver for us on occasion, but he was with us almost 40 years. So he will be very, very missed. He was a big part of that bus driving family. And we can't say enough good things about him and how much he will be missed as part of that. So it's also National School Counseling Week. And so some of you may have seen this on one of our social media accounts, saying thank you to our school counselors. And they are an amazing, empathetic, and knowledgeable group who I think all of us rely on to be able to be the voice of students and the voice of supporting students and their mental health, as well as all of the other important academic pieces. They're a treasure, and we're very lucky to have them. And congratulations to Coach Mitchell, Section 4 Coach of the Year for boys soccer. So that's pretty fantastic. Since taking over the program in 2018, he's earned 3 WIAA Division II boys soccer state titles and has been named Division II Wisconsin Soccer Coaching Association Coach of the Year 3 times. And this is kind of fun. You'll notice that 2 of our colleagues were featured on a nationally, I think it's called nationally syndicated show called Into the Outdoors. And it's on environmental and outdoor topics, hosted by young people. And this weekend, Andy Weiland and Carrie Majeski were featured on the environmental sustainability episode. And you'll see them standing there in Forest Edge talking about, they're being interviewed actually by this young person named Charlie regarding, why we made the decisions we made with Forest Edge. And then that's really a lot of what Andy talks about. And then Carrie Majeski talks a lot about what it means for the students in the classroom. So if you want to take a look, it's called Into the Outdoors. It's a 27-minute segment, but I believe they're starting in minute 21. So another thing that you could see if you wanted to do a search on the internet is you can see that we have a Oregon Life feature for Miss Byarski, who is celebrating 55 years as a teacher at Oregon High School. And these are some examples from her Master Chef class. So she's the most recently featured program on Oregon Life, if you'd like to take a look. This is a fun one. This is Prairie View Elementary second graders. They recently had the opportunity to explore Hispanic and Chinese cultural traditions as part of their social studies unit. So they read books, participated in different activities, and got to try some different foods: spring rolls, dumplings, and tamales. And then Brooklyn, they had a really cool science learning experience. This is second grade again. And they had a special guest in to talk about materials used to make clothing. So students engaged in hands-on learning to feel different materials and figure out if it came from plants, animals, or a lab. And then they were educated in the different properties of those materials and the effects of those properties on the environment. For example, the more clothes that contain plastic matter are washed, the more plastic particles that end up in the ocean. So this has implications for the environment and seafood consumption. So I think this is a pretty complex topic for second grade, but our students are clearly more than capable. Next, we have a third grade class at Brooklyn, and this sounds so fun, and it's very connected to what Mr. Tanner was just saying. This is Miss Spitzer's third grade class solving fraction problems to get out of an escape room. So they are working collaboratively, building their math skills, and they're having a lot of creative fun to do it.
Sounds like a good board activity.
Okay, I'll remember that. And then you have a visit of the Netherwood Knoll Nature Club to Worth Woods. And you have the RCI Jazz Club. They're having a great time exploring the world of jazz music. They recently learned their first blues scale, performed call and response riffs using the B-flat concert blues scale. Wow. And listened to a recording of a piece by Duke Ellington. And you know what? This group meets at recess. And this is an RCI Science Passion Project. This is 5th grade in Mr. DeBrew's science class. Yes, there is a Mr. DeBrew in 5th grade. In case all of you are thinking, this is the younger Mr. DeBrew. In his science class, they're engaging in passion projects. And this group, they were wondering about space. So this group chose the topics of UFOs and aliens. And as part of the project, students were lucky enough to interview an investigative reporter, Leslie Keene, about her research on UFOs and aliens. Ms. Keene has written articles for the New York Times and is producing a TV show on National Geographic called UFOs Investigating the Unknown. I think these 5th graders will be thinking about this years and years from now, the time they interviewed that author. And this is the 2023 National Junior German Honor Society. So congratulations to the Oregon Middle School 2023 National Junior German Honor Society inductees. Students participated in a special induction ceremony earlier this month. So congratulations to them. And then this is Oregon Middle School students in Miss Flynn's English class. This is 7th grade, and they're doing something called a quick write. And during a quick write exercise, students choose one of the topics from a list and spend 10 minutes writing on the topic. And then when 10 minutes are up, they're encouraged to read their piece to the class. So thank you, Miss Flynn, for facilitating this very clearly engaging topic. So you look at the pictures, you're like, they're in it. They're in the midst of this, and that's exciting. Also, the middle school and Miss Grady's 7th grade science class at the they used their safety goggles and their graduated cylinders and their ring stands and their thermometers and matches and different Cheetos varieties to engage in a calorie meter lab. The lab offered hands-on opportunity to practice calculating the calories in a food substance. They're burning Cheetos. I bet they're going to remember that one too. That sounds really cool. And we also had some 7th graders in Upham Woods this week. 7M recently had a team building event at Upham Woods. So each student who was a part of the team prepared for and engaged in a number of challenges throughout the day, such as building a doghouse, constructing a sled, making team posters and flags, designing t-shirts, archery, and a lot more. Also want to say congratulations to our Skills USA students. They recently competed in the Skills USA regional competition in Wisconsin Rapids. OSD was well represented. They brought home 3 gold and 2 silver medals. They had first and second place in technical drafting. Jonathan Krieger was first and Bryson Bartlett was second. They had a first and second in related technical math competition. Soren Lesperance and Jonathan Kruger, first and second place in that. And Bryson Bartlett did the CO2 car dragster competition and won first place. So, wow. Way to go, students. That's pretty cool. And then we had our winter band clinic with UW-Madison clinicians, and our students, they were selected to be a part of this group earlier this month. They participated in the clinic during the day and performed at the Mead Witter Concert Hall stage at the Hamel Music Center in the afternoon. So you can see for trumpet, we had Braden Bakken and Alex Nelson. For percussion, Ethan Horton and Elliot Lesperance. And bassoon was Chloe Marin. Congratulations to them. As well as our swimmers who advanced to state. We have 6 swimmers advancing to state this upcoming Saturday in Waukesha. And it's 6 swimmers in 6 different events. Okay. So I'm excited to report on how they do after this event in Waukesha. We have students in the 50 free, the 100 free, the 100 breast, the 100 free, the 200 medley relay, the 200 free relay, and the 400 free relay. This is an amazing group. I'm super excited to report back on everything they accomplished in Waukesha on Saturday. We also had some wrestlers advancing to sectionals, so good job for them. 7 male wrestlers are advancing to sectionals this upcoming Saturday in Waunakee, and the girls bracket begins competition, and we have 9 entries in the girls bracket too. So that's really exciting, and we'll be excited to report to you on how all of them did at sectionals. And then you probably saw this on social media, but it was so cool. We had a student who really saved the day when a scheduled referee wasn't able to make it to a JV2 game. This is Evan. He's an OHS student, a varsity basketball player, and a certified referee. So he stepped in at the last minute and made the game happen, and that's a really cool thing. And then just remember to tune into the OST podcast. This is our 7th episode is featuring Music Man behind the scenes. So that was really fun. I attended one of the rehearsals and interviewed the young persons playing Marion and Harold, the 2 main characters in the Music Man, as well as Miss Hoyer, who stepped into, she was already doing the choreography, but then stepped in to help after the director had to step aside. And so she just really picked up that ball and ran because those kids were having a great time, and I can't wait. I have tickets for Friday night, and I'm very excited to go.
Thank you. You just have to stop for a minute after, you do really good reports, but tonight I think really talks about the breadth and depth of this school district. We had math, reading, writing, social studies, science, extracurriculars. And think about, I think about my own, small town, rural high school and all the opportunities that are available to our kids here. And it's because of our educators. The things that they are doing in class is to make this stuff come to life. And then the opportunities that they're providing to our kids outside of the classroom, it's pretty stunning. It really is. So I really appreciate the work that you guys put into these reports. It really, I think, brings it home for all of us. And I know a lot of people watch these board meetings from home, but there are some really, really good things happening in our school district. So thank you all for your leadership and for the educators that provide those opportunities to our kids. They're really going to benefit for it from a long, long time. So great way to end the meeting. F, closing, future agenda. Our next meeting is Monday, February 27th. We will have items from policy because they've been busy. And we'll, I'm sure, have a few other things to talk about at that meeting as well. So now moving on to checkout. I will go around the horn. Troy, anything? Heather? Mary? Leslie? Anna?
Actually, I have 2 things, just because I'm really excited about them. And I think you're going to be at one of them, Troy, on Friday. Oh, you're not. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, I have 2 opportunities to be at our elementary schools this week, and so I'm really excited. On Thursday, I'm one of the readers at Dinner and a Book at Brooklyn Elementary. So I'm going to be reading Rosie Revere, the Engineer, and very excited about that. And then on Friday, I'm going to be at Netherwood Knoll Elementary doing a STEAM outreach for the entire 1st grade. So really excited to talk about some traffic safety stuff. We're going to have them, I think, build a bridge. So just really excited to get into the schools and be part of that. So thought I would share.
That's awesome. Thanks, Anna. Tim? Peyton, anything from you? You guys are super busy. A lot of stuff happening at the high school, huh? All right. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned at 7:58. Thank you, everybody.